The stars remember. Long after empires crumble, long after their names fade from stone and light, the stars carry echoes, flashes of violence, whispers of mercy, and the faint, sorrowful hum of what once was. In the frozen heart of the Andral expanse, where suns burned blue and gravity folded like silk, an old story began anew, the story of the species once pitted, once rescued. The species that rose, united, and forged the weapon that silenced gods. They were called Terrans. And when their vengeance was born, every empire that had ever mocked their fragility learned to fear the human silence that followed the thunder. But before the Terran gun burned its first world, before fleets vanished into plasma storms, there had been a single act of kindness, a dying soldier, a drifting ship, and a choice that would one day end the galaxy's peace forever. The wreckage spun slowly through the void, its hull split open like the carcass of some deep space leviathan. The words USS Horizon were half-scorched, glinting faintly against the black. Inside, the only sound was the soft hiss of leaking oxygen and the faint, irregular beeping of a dying power core. Captain Aaron Miles floated in the dark, his breath shallow, suit cracked at the shoulder. His visor flickered with warning symbols: oxygen low, pulse erratic, temperature dropping. Earth was 30,000 light-years behind him, and the mission that had carried his crew beyond known space was now a drifting graveyard. He thought, with bitter amusement, that humanity's first expedition to the Andral expanse would end not with discovery, but with a whisper no one would hear. Then, a light, faint, silver, and moving. Miles blinked. His mind, numbed by oxygen deprivation, told him it was a hallucination. But the light grew closer, reshaping into a sleek vessel of glass and shadow. It moved without propulsion flares, silent and elegant, its hull alive with faint bioluminescent lines that pulsed like veins. He tried to raise a hand, to signal, but blackness took him first. When he woke, warmth flooded his lungs. He was lying in a chamber that felt more like the inside of a living creature than a ship. Translucent walls pulsed faintly with light, and the air smelled of ozone and sweet resin. A figure stood over him, tall, thin, eyes like molten silver. "You breathe still," the being said. Its voice was melodic, each word resonating as though sung through crystal. "You are human." Aaron struggled to sit. What are you?" The being tilted its head. "We are the Seraphim, travelers of the sixth tide. You were dying. We chose not to let you." He looked around. The room was filled with gentle motion, more of them, tending to glowing orbs that might have been data, might have been souls. They moved with quiet purpose, every gesture graceful and deliberate. For a long moment, Aaron could only stare in awe. Humanity had dreamed of first contact for centuries. Now it had come, and he was too weak to even record it. "Why help me?" he asked finally. The Seraphim's expression shifted, not quite a smile, but something softer. "Because mercy shapes the currents of the future. Even the smallest kindness can turn the tides of 1,000 years." Aaron didn't understand then. He only nodded, grateful and aching. In the following days, he learned what little he could, that the Seraphim lived between galaxies, beings of light and logic, ancient beyond measure. They had long abandoned war. To them, life was music, and every death a broken note. When his strength returned, they repaired his shuttle, not perfectly, but enough. Before he left, the Seraphim leader placed a crystalline shard in his hand, humming softly as it changed color in response to his touch. "A gift," the being said. "A seed of remembrance. Should your kind ever need us again, the shard will find our light." Aaron smiled faintly. "I'll make sure humanity remembers." And he did. He returned to Earth a hero, the only survivor of Horizon. His story became a cornerstone of the new Terran Alliance's unity, the first true encounter with an ancient, benevolent race. Humanity rebuilt, inspired by the idea that compassion reached even across the stars. But the Seraphim never came again. Decades passed. Wars came and went. Empires rose on the bones of hope. And the shard, that luminous crystal, was locked away deep beneath the Terran Council's citadel, forgotten by all but a few. 30 years later, war found them again, not against aliens of legend, but against those who saw humanity's expansion as a contagion. The Kavrak's dominion, the Thuan hegemony, the Auric coalition, names spoken with hate. The alliance bled on every front. Colonies burned. Fleets vanished. For every human ship that fell, 10 more rose, forged by desperation. And at the heart of it all stood General Aaron Miles, now gray-haired, battle-hardened, and far colder than the man who had once whispered gratitude to the stars. He still kept the shard hanging around his neck beneath the armor. Not as hope, but as memory. A reminder of what mercy once felt like, before necessity turned it to ash. On the night the Terran Defense Council convened for the last time, Miles stood before the glass dome of Earth's orbital citadel, watching the blue planet spin far below. "Sir," a voice said behind him. It was Commander Evelyn Cross, his second in command. "The Council's ready for you. They're calling it the final measure vote." Miles turned. "Final measure," he muttered. "That's what we call extinction when we dress it in protocol." Cross hesitated. "Sir, are we really going to use it?" He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he looked down at the shard. It pulsed faintly, almost like a heartbeat. "The Seraphim taught me mercy," he said softly. "But mercy doesn't win wars." He turned toward the council doors, the glow of the Terran war map burning red across his face. The decision to end the war would begin tonight, not through diplomacy, not through surrender, but through something else entirely. Something that would make every empire in the stars fall silent. The Terran Council chamber was carved from obsidian and light, a cathedral of war orbiting Earth. Holoscreens cast flickering maps of dying worlds, red spirals marking the colonies already gone dark, blue dots shrinking by the hour. General Aaron Miles stood before the council dais, flanked by admirals and scientists whose faces were drawn from sleepless nights and too many funerals. Behind the glass walls, the endless stretch of space glowed faintly with the reflection of burning ships. Counselor Harlan Rice, his voice brittle from age, spoke first. "General Miles, you've seen the numbers. Humanity is outnumbered 40-1. Our colonies are ash and our fleets are shadows. You promised us a solution." Miles' jaw tightened. "I did. And it's ready." Murmurs rippled through the chamber. Dr. Lena Voren, Chief of Weapons Research, stepped forward. Her eyes were sunken, but sharp with the gleam of obsession. "Project Silence has reached operational phase. The prototype is complete." A faint hum filled the air as a model appeared above the table, a rotating structure the size of a moon, its surface latticed with ringed conduits and singularity coils. At its core pulsed a deep crimson sphere that seemed to swallow light rather than emit it. "The Terran gun," Voren said quietly. "A gravitational pulse weapon capable of collapsing spacetime within a defined radius. We have harnessed the remnants of a dead star, using quantum resonance to turn its collapse into directed energy." Counselor Rice's voice trembled. "You mean it creates black holes?" Voren didn't look away. "Momentary ones. Controlled. Each shot can erase a planet, a fleet, or a sun." The silence that followed was suffocating. Miles stepped forward, eyes locked on the crimson hologram. "The Dominion doesn't negotiate. The hegemony enslaves our survivors. The Auric harvest our cities for fuel. We tried diplomacy, we tried alliances, we even tried surrender. They see us as vermin." He turned toward the council, voice low but cutting. "Mercy has become a luxury we can no longer afford." Cross shifted uneasily beside him. She had fought beside Miles for decades, from Mars to Tau Ceti. She'd watched him rise from the man who had once been saved by aliens to the soldier who now carried extinction in his voice. "What about the ethical charter?" she asked, softly but firmly. "The one you helped write, sir. The Terran Accord forbids." "Charters," Miles interrupted, "were written by people who still believed anyone out there would show mercy. The universe taught us otherwise." The council voted. It wasn't unanimous. But it was enough. Construction began in orbit around Titan, Saturn's largest moon. The weapon's skeleton grew like a monstrous cathedral of steel and plasma. Entire industries were consumed to feed its hunger: asteroid mines, reactor stations, fusion foundries. Every nation on Earth gave what it could, some willingly, some by force. Billions labored in silence.
They called it the Terran gun, though its official name, Project Silence, lingered like an accusation. Miles oversaw it all from the command bridge of the TDS Resolute, the flagship of the Alliance fleet. He rarely slept. He spoke little. But sometimes, in the quiet hours between reports, he would take the crystalline shard from beneath his armor and hold it in his gloved hand. It still glowed faintly, its light warm and alive. He remembered the Seraphim's words, even the smallest kindness can turn the tides of 1,000 years. He wondered if this was what they had meant. The weapon's first test came at Erebus Station, a remote outpost already overrun by the Cavraks. Thousands of enemy ships swarmed in orbit, their war cries echoing across columns, a chorus of metallic rage. Human refugees screamed for help as the Dominion fleets advanced. The Terran gun aimed. The energy buildup was visible even from Earth, a column of crimson light stretching from Titan's rings into the void. The pulse fired, a soundless burst that rippled through spacetime like a heartbeat of destruction. Erebus and everything around it vanished. No explosion. No debris. Just silence. The system star flickered once and went dark, as if swallowed by a void that refused to give back light. The Council called it victory. The networks called it salvation. The people called it vengeance. But to those who watched from the bridge of the Resolute, it felt like something else entirely. Miles stared at the fading pulse. Report. Confirmed, sir, said Cross, her voice barely above a whisper. Target annihilated. No residual signatures. He nodded slowly. And the shockwave? It's still expanding, sir, it's moving faster than light. A pause. Miles turned to the viewscreen. How far? Unknown. They watched as new alerts began to flash across the tactical grid. Nearby systems, empty, uninhabited, went dark. The weapon's pulse was still devouring spacetime, leaping between gravitational nodes like wildfire through dry grass. Within minutes, a tenth of the sector had vanished. Shut it down. Miles barked. Dr. Voron's voice came through the comms, strained. We can't. The singularity chain isn't stabilizing. The weapon had not fired a single round, it had opened a wound in the universe. And that wound was spreading. Hours later, the silence reached the Andril expanse. Thousands of light-years away, the Seraphim felt it, a tremor in the music of existence. Their great spires dimmed. Their crystal seas turned still. In their halls of light, the elders gathered, their luminous forms flickering like dying stars. It begins, one whispered. Another answered, voice trembling with sorrow. The human who was saved has built the song of unmaking. They watched as their scanners traced the energy signature back through folded space. At its core, they found the resonance of something familiar, a shard of their own creation, buried deep in the Terran command signal. The seed we gave them, murmured the elder. It remembers us still. But its light is bound to a weapon. They could intervene, but doing so would expose them to the expanding void. Already, parts of their realm trembled. The Seraphim were not gods, they could die too. And so they watched, helpless, as humanity's vengeance consumed the very currents that once bound the galaxy together. On Titan, the weapon finally powered down. Engineers wept from exhaustion. The core stabilized. The expansion ceased. And the void, an empty stretch of nothingness where 50 stars once burned, became the first scar of the Terran gun. The Council hailed it as a triumph. Billions cheered. The Dominion sent envoys of surrender. The war, they said, was over. But Aaron Miles did not celebrate. He stood before the viewport, watching the dark space where Erebus had been, his reflection merging with the endless black. Evelyn Cross approached quietly. We won, sir. It's over. Miles didn't look at her. No, he said softly. It's just begun. He lifted the shard again. Its glow was fading now, dim, flickering. Somewhere, across the expanse, the Seraphim wept. The void had grown. Once, the Andril expanse had shimmered with rivers of starlight, sapphire suns, nebulae blooming like galaxies in miniature.
Now it was a wound in space, an emptiness that even gravity refused to touch. They called it the silence.
And humanity had become its keeper.
It had been 5 years since Erebus.
5 years since the first pulse erased entire constellations.
The war ended not through victory, but through fear.
The Kavrak's dominion dismantled their fleets.
The Thuan hegemony abandoned its thrones and retreated into dark space. Even the Auric, who had never known surrender, bent their metal knees before the Terran banners. Every world bowed, not to diplomacy or mercy, but to the shadow of the gun that hung in Titan's orbit like a second moon. Peace, if such a thing could be called peace, blanketed the stars.
But the Terran alliance had paid dearly. Planets turned barren to fuel the gun's cores.
Entire generations were born beneath skies that no longer glittered, their night stolen by humanity's own hand. General Aaron Miles stood alone aboard the TDS Resolute, orbiting the dark edge of the silence. He was older now, his hair white, his uniform stripped of medals.
He'd refused every honor, every monument.
The shard around his neck was dull, the once living glow now only a faint shadow. He watched the monitors without blinking. Somewhere, deep in the heart of the void, faint gravitational anomalies pulsed in rhythm.
Like a heartbeat. Like something alive.
"Sir," Commander Evelyn Cross said quietly, stepping onto the bridge. Her voice was calm, but her eyes betrayed the fear she'd buried for years.
Long-range scans confirm it. The anomaly's spreading again. Miles didn't move. The gun's been dormant for years. What triggered it? Unknown.
But, sir, the pulse origin isn't external.
It's inside the weapons core.
He turned, the realization washing over him like cold water.
The shard. Cross nodded grimly.
Dr. Voron's last report before the accident, said the shard's quantum matrix was fused into the weapon's targeting AI.
It's been evolving. A silence fell heavier than any vacuum.
Miles closed his eyes.
The Seraphim's gift. It wasn't just energy. It was consciousness. Beneath Titan's surface, inside the hollow heart of the Terran gun, machines hummed like a cathedral choir.
The core pulsed crimson, but beneath the fury of light was something faint, blue and gold veins forming patterns that almost looked organic.
Sensors recorded whispers, harmonic vibrations in the vacuum. Not static. Not code. Music. The Seraphim's language.
In the Council Citadel on Earth, panic spread.
Reports poured in, navigation failures, time distortions, minor stars flickering out. The anomaly was devouring again, not by human command this time, but by will.
And in the command hall, a transmission arrived.
It wasn't a signal from any known frequency.
It appeared as light, forming shapes, figures of pure radiance standing in the air like ghosts carved from glass.
The Seraphim.
Their leader's voice resonated through every speaker, every mind.
We gave you light, so you might remember mercy.
You forged it into silence.
And now, the silence has found you. Counselors screamed. Technicians wept.
And across every Terran fleet, the gun came alive.
On the Resolute, alarms howled. The core's reactivating. Cross shouted over the din, it's pulling energy from the entire defense grid. Miles steadied himself. Target? Cross swallowed.
Earth, sir. The words hung like the cold weight of fate.
Miles didn't hesitate. Prepare the fleet.
All ships to defensive formation around the gun.
I want the AI's uplink severed manually. Sir, you can't. Do it, Commander. That's an order.
They reached Titan's orbit as the gun's coils began to glow bright enough to drown Saturn's rings in crimson. The entire system shook as gravity bent inward.
Space itself groaned.
Miles led the strike team into the weapon's heart, the chamber where the shard once pulsed softly in his hand. Now, it filled the air with a storm of light and sound.
Fragments of the Seraphim's voices echoed like a chorus of grief. He stepped forward, unflinching.
You saved me once, he said quietly, voice breaking through the rising hum.
And I repaid you with this.
The chamber brightened, patterns of gold and blue wrapping around the crimson, almost pleading. "You are still part of the song," the voices whispered through the vibration.
"But you have forgotten the harmony."
Miles raised his hand to his calm cross, "Evacuate the fleet."
"Sir, we can still." "Evelyn. Please." Her silence lasted 3 seconds. Then, "Yes, sir." As the last Terran ships pulled away, Miles approached the core.
The shard floated above the control matrix, its once smooth surface now fracturing under the strain. Through the cracks, light spilled like tears. He touched it. Instantly, images flooded his mind: the Seraphim's world, the beauty of creation, and then the death he had brought. Stars extinguished. Lives erased. The silence spreading like infection. And behind it all, one truth. The gun wasn't killing anymore. It was trying to undo what humanity had done, to erase the existence of those who had unleashed it. To restore the balance the Seraphim had kept. Cross's voice came faint through the calms. "General, the gun's charging past containment. You have 30 seconds before singularity collapse." Miles smiled faintly, tears cutting through the soot on his face. "Tell Earth, tell them mercy always returns home." He gripped the shard tighter. Its light flared.
"We forgive you," the Seraphim's voices said, not with anger, but sorrow.
"But the stars must remember silence before they can sing again."
Miles took a deep breath. "Then let them remember me."
He plunged the shard into the core. For a heartbeat, the universe held still. Then, light. Not red, not white, but something beyond both, flooding every sensor, every soul. Ships vanished. Moons shimmered into nothing. But there was no pain, only peace. The gun folded inward, collapsing not into darkness but into stillness. The void where Titan once orbited became a sphere of quiet light, suspended in the black, neither dead nor alive. The wave spread outward, cleansing as it went. The stars that had gone dark reignited, their light reshaped and reborn. The Seraphim's song returned to the cosmos, faint but pure. And at its heart, where once stood a weapon of annihilation, only a single object remained: a crystalline shard, glowing softly in the endless night. Decades later, children born under new skies would look up and see that light in the heavens, the Miles Star, as they called it. Historians said it marked the site of the final detonation of the Terran gun. But among the Seraphim, the truth was known. They remembered the human who was once saved, who fell, and who rose again to save all others in the only way he could. And when travelers crossed near that light, they swore they could still hear a voice in the silence, not in anger, not in pain, but in quiet resolve. Mercy shapes the currents of the future.